Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family travel a little smarter. And I'd like to welcome back to the show our co-host, Christy Puttick. How you doing today, Christy?
I am well. How are you, Steve?
Not too bad. I'm super excited about this show because whenever we get a chance to talk about Adventures by Disney and the experiences that families have on it, I just love hearing the different, adventures that people go on. How about yourself?
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting to me, especially because our guest has a 7-year-old, and my kid will be 7 next year, and I just want to hear how the little ones do on these trips.
And
I'm so excited.
You just booked one, but it's going to be in California, right?
Yeah, we decided to not cross the pond. We're just going to cross the country, and we are going to do the Disneyland Southern California tour.
Well, hopefully this will be a good show to kind of see how the kids do on obviously different tours. But let's just jump into it, and welcome to the show today, Jennifer from Texas. How you doing today, Jen?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Not too bad.
So I got my y'all in.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, Christy's from Michigan, and there's a distinct. You guys have a distinct. What am I looking for? It's not drawl. That's not what I'm saying. That's like Texas.
Well, it's a little bit of a drawl. I did all my training on the East and West Coast, so I returned after a long time. So the accents, it comes out occasionally.
It's kicking back in. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's just talk about the tour. You guys, which ABD did you guys do?
I definitely wanted to take the kids to Europe because my daughter, who's 11, was heading to middle school. She started this year. So, and we'd kind of been talking about it for a while. So I picked England and France because I thought that was probably the, most accessible introduction to Europe for the kids. And personally, I'd been to England and I've been kind of all over Eastern Europe, but I'd never been to France and to Paris specifically. And I'd always wanted to go. I took French in high school, and that was kind of the reasoning behind it. And we needed a trip during the summer because we wanted to take 2 weeks and needed a time when the kids were out of school.
So taking kids over to England and France and just Europe for the first time, how did you prepare that? So that's one of the questions we get a lot.
Mm-hmm.
People go down to the Caribbean on the cruises, but I think that's like a big hurdle for people. Like,
sure.
when do you take your kids over to Europe or outside of the country? How did you prepare them for it, or what did you guys talk about beforehand?
I mean, I love to travel. For a long time, I'm a physician, and so you're in training forever until well into your 30s, and so you don't have any money or time. And then I had my daughter when I was 30 and my son a couple of years later, and so I didn't want to take them when, I wanted them to be able to walk on their own and not have to pick them up, not do the strollers, and I wanted them to be old enough to kind of, actively participate in the trip. So we tried Hawaii last year because I figured that was a long flight from Texas to kind of test out the flying. I mean, we'd obviously kind of been various places in the U.S. and to the Caribbean. And Hawaii went great, and they did well, on the long plane rides. So I thought, okay, I think they're ready. They're big foodies, too. I mean, they'll, eat about anything. They love sushi. They'll try about anything. They won't always like it, but
nice.
Yeah. So I thought, between that and my daughter especially loves cities. She loves to walk around New York and DC, and she gets motion sick easily, so she's not big on boats and taxis and things like that. But she'll walk and walk and walk. My son, is a little less enthusiastic about that part because he's the younger one. But it seemed like the right time to try. Figured we might as well go for it because there's lots of places I want to go before they're out of the house.
So what was your plan with the flights over there and arrival? Did you arrive early?
Yeah, we did. My general plan was we wanted to spend a few days on our own in London, and then the ABD trip is about a week long, and it starts in London and finishes in Paris. And then at the end of the trip, we did a few days in Disneyland Paris, and then came back to the city of Paris to do a few days on our own. So for a total of 2 weeks.
Did you do the add-on Disneyland Paris with ABD, or did you do it separately?
Yeah, that was an add-on, which was probably a little more expensive, but they
make it seamless, right?
Yeah, they made it so easy that, since I'd been planning the extra days in London and Paris on my own, I decided to do that too. And after our getting to London was a pretty big disaster, so I was really glad I'd done the add-on after that, because it was a hard trip over.
And explain that to us.
Well, we actually were flying from San Antonio to Detroit, and we had a 4-hour layover in Detroit, and then we were flying from Detroit to London and landing at a pretty good time, around 11 a.m., so the time change would put us, there early in the morning. So I thought, I had it all planned out. And we took our plane from San Antonio, left on time, and then we started circling Detroit because of the weather. And we were circling, and I kept saying, oh, no, we have 4 hours, don't worry about it. And then we ran out of gas.
No!
And yes, they landed us in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The only planes leaving out of Kalamazoo apparently go to Detroit. So I said, it's okay. The weather's clearing. There were like 3 planes. They're all going to Detroit, and we were the third. And the first took off, and then the second took off, and they said, no, we're going to take off. No worries. And then right as we were about to board, they said, oh, the crew just timed out. Sorry.
Oh, my God.
And yeah, so obviously with little kids, they were so excited for the trip.
It's your industry. Why didn't they know? They could do math and determine that crew was going to time out before they make these people worry. Well, they could have driven to Detroit.
I would have taken a rental car and driven in the 4 hours, but they kept saying, no, it's 30-minute flight. We're going to take off. The guys in front of us got the last rental car. Because we ran down to get in the rental car line, and these guys were a couple of construction workers from Detroit. And my kids, of course, burst into tears, because at this point they were just panicked and tired. Did you ask those dudes
to get in the car with them?
Hilariously, I did. Well, one of them kind of looked at the other one like, you've got to be kidding me, because the one guy said, oh, yeah, we'll drive you. We're going to Detroit anyway. And so we get in the car with these 2 strange guys. And the only car left is this big pickup truck. And we throw our bags into the back. We get in. These poor guys, they drove as fast as they could, or with construction. And then it started pouring rain. And our bags are in the back of this open pickup truck. And I'm thinking, we are going to get into a wreck and die on the road. And people are going to say, why was this woman?
Yeah, right. They were stolen by these
strangers with their children. So we get there literally with 15 minutes before the plane's supposed to take off.
Well,
and we run through the airport, beg them to take our bags, fully knowing the bags may not make it. The TSA pre-check's closed because it's late at night at this point. We go through security, we run up, as they're boarding. And meanwhile, I had called from the road to say, please save our seats. We are trying to get there, because Delta had kind of washed their hands of it when they couldn't take off from Kalamazoo. We get up there, we're so excited because we made it, and, despite everything, and they'd given away our seats.
No!
But, and the kids burst into tears again. So, meanwhile, they are able to find 3 seats together, back further in the plane. So we get on, and then we sit on the runway for 2 hours because there's some delays. But we were and everybody was complaining around us, but we were so excited to be on the plane. So
what an adventure!
I told the kids, and I said, Mom promised we were going to Europe, and we were going to Europe. So we made it on that plane. It was crazy.
Well, I think that's just another example that everybody always talks about, make sure you get there a couple days early, especially in Europe as far as the time zone changes go, or even if you're just going across the country with the time zone changes.
Oh, for sure.
Traveling can definitely be an adventure, but.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. I told the kid, I'm like, I think we earned some good karma for a few years, so. Wow. And the plane ride back was smooth.
Well, perfect.
Thank God for that. Here, I have another logistical question, because you said that your flight was late enough where TSA pre-check was closed. So that means you had one of the really late flights over the
I think it took off around 9 p.m. maybe.
Did they still serve dinner at the start of the flight?
They did, but my kid, they sat awake for the time we were sitting on the tarmac for the couple hours because we were all so hyped up, obviously, from the journey. But as soon as we got in the air, they passed out. So, I ate dinner.
Okay.
And, of course, about 2 hours into the flight, somebody had a medical emergency.
Oh, geez, come on.
And I thought, if they turn this plane around, after all we did to get on. But fortunately, she was okay. It was, it was a tense 30 minutes, but then she did okay. So we made it.
The few days you did in London, did you stay at the same hotel that the Adventure was using?
That was, especially being on my own and with my mother-in-law and the kids. I thought the easiest thing was just the ABD starts in the Landmark in London. So we just did a couple extra nights in that hotel.
And did you book that with the ABD?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I guess we haven't really talked about this. Who all went on this trip, Jen?
My husband was supposed to go on, but he got a new job a few weeks, or a month maybe before the trip started. So he couldn't go. And so we subbed out his mom, my mother-in-law, and she flew from New York. Luckily had no issues going over. She met up with us and did the trip with us. So we spent a couple days in London pre-stay. We went to see, we're big Harry Potter fans. So we went to see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which was a 2-part play in one day. So it was pretty epic, but the kids loved it. And we went to the British Museum and we did a couple of teas around London. So we had a great couple days.
Did you do the studio tour for Harry Potter also?
We didn't, because you had to leave. It's a little outside the city. So we wanted to, since we only had a couple days, we really wanted to focus on things in the city. So we went to the Science Museum. There's something called the Wonder Lab there, which is kind of a hands-on science exhibit for kids. We did a great tea at I believe it's called the Ampersand Hotel. They have a place called, what is it? It's just called, I think, the Science Tea there. And I mean, it's fabulous because it's tea time, but yet it's interactive. So they give the kids, basically you can do like science experiments by mixing drinks and, decorating some of the scones and things. So they loved it. It was a lot of fun.
That's kind of cool. How'd you guys find out about that?
I just kind of, Google searches and things to do in London with kids or best teas in London. This was called the Science Afternoon Tea, and it's the drawing room in the Ampersand Hotel. And that was fabulous. We did another great one called Sketch Tea, which was a lot of fun, but the Science Tea was right up their alley because it was interactive.
Well, now let's jump into the trip itself.
Yeah.
It always starts off with the dinner the first night. Kind of talk about how do they bring you guys together as a group, and do they do anything special for the kids to kind of get the kids into the trip as well, or does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, our guides, first of all, I think like I said, I was able to find great activities, I think, in London and Paris myself. But I think what makes the ABD fun, I was kind of trying this out more. It's not that I didn't think I could, keep us entertained and safe around London and Paris, but, I'd eventually like to go somewhere, China or Egypt, where I think I would want the safety and convenience of the group tour and the ABD experience. So this was more kind of just to try out the ABD product. And I think other people have said, and it's true, the guides are, I think, almost 80% of what make it great. We had a couple of guys, Lewis and Cesc. Lewis was from England and Cesc was from Spain, and they were just fabulous. They were so great with kids and with the adults, and I think really kind of made the experience. My kids still talk about them constantly.
How many kids total were on the tour, approximately?
Maybe 20, maybe. Almost half the group, maybe a little less. No, probably about 20. My kids were kind of in the middle, though, of the age range. A lot of them were, I'd say, 13 and teenagers, and then there were a few younger kids. So mine were a little bit in between. So they didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say bond with the other kids, but it's funny. They bonded with a lot of the adults. There was a multi-generational family with a grandfather named Ed, and he and my daughter became like best friends. They did the bike ride through Versailles together and finished first and second, trying to beat each other. And so, it's funny how I think it's not always who you predict you'll really bond with too. But the first night, one of the things they did to kind of get the kids involved is they had an actor play basically Sherlock Holmes, and he came in and they did kind of almost like a little theater show with, getting the kids involved to find clues and solve a puzzle during the dinner. And that was a lot of fun. And then just, we kind of went around the room and everybody said a little bit about themselves and what they were looking forward to on the trip.
I really like what you added as far as, how your daughter bonded with. When you said Ed, I was like, well, who wouldn't want to bond with Ed?
Yeah, I know. It was this random guy named Ed. But,
Ed sounds like a nice guy.
So you guys get driven by construction workers and you bond with Ed.
Yeah, you just never know. That's all I'll say. But there were definitely several multi-generational families on the trip, which was helpful, actually, because we ended up taking my mother-in-law. So it was kind of nice that we had people, of every age.
So we have not done an ABD yet. We want to at some point. I know Christy's coming up to do her first one, but I think that's one of the main reasons why we really want to do it. I mean, we travel pretty good as a family. We have a lot of we have a good time with our kids, but when you can kind of expand that sometimes for a couple of days, I think that opens up and I think that listening to people like you that have been on these trips, that is kind of the specialty about it, just with the guides and the other people that you're kind of experiencing things with, that really makes it kind of special and magical, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think we have a somewhat introverted family. We're very close with each other, but I think it's so I was a little nervous about how I would like being stuck with, the same group of people for a week. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. And I think it gave the parents a break, too. You weren't constantly having to entertain your kids. And, not that we don't like entertaining them, but they had other people to talk with and interact with. If I didn't know the answer to one of their questions, one of the guides usually obviously knew a lot more about what we were seeing than I did. And then they would bring in a local guide. The one for London was absolutely amazing. She was just really fabulous. Her name was Sarah. And when we went to the Tower of London, she did this whole kind of interactive retelling of the story of, I'm blanking which Henry it is. Is it Henry the Eighth, I guess? Yeah, and his 6 wives.
Yeah,
and got,
Henry VIII.
Pulled people from our group to be the wives and Henry. And I mean, it was just captivating and, really endearing. And then just her, she would talk on the bus when we were driving from place to place about, what it was like to live in the city and her takes on things. And I mean, it just entertained everybody, the kids, as well as the adults. So that was really that's kind of the magical part of it. It's not necessarily, although they loved it. I mean, we did archery in the countryside and the kids loved that. And my son and I did the high-speed boat ride on the River Thames, and they loved that. But it's also kind of those quieter moments which really kind of make the trip.
How did you decide which excursions? Because I guess it's not really an excursion, but they have events or activities, and you can either do them or skip them. Right?
Yeah, I think it's a little different. The river cruise, you get to pick amongst a choice of excursions. The land trips, it seems like you're pretty much always together. For instance, my mother-in-law sat out some things. She just, sat under some shade and watched the archery. She didn't want to participate, although Ed did, so I give Ed credit. Or, for instance, the bike ride, she, sat down and relaxed while I took the kids on the bike ride in Versailles. And then with the high-speed boat ride, my daughter get pretty profoundly motion sick, which is always one of my concerns when we plan travel. So, for instance, the bus ride, we kind of always tried to sit in the front of the bus, and her and another lady who got very motion sick, they were kind of known as, okay, we give these two the front of the bus. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't take her on the high-speed boat ride. And she, and Grandma went to get ice cream while I took my son, just because we kind of know there's certain things we're going to set ourselves up for trouble if we do those things with her. So they were very flexible about, working with us when we had to kind of alter the plans for certain members of the group. But as a whole, everybody does everything together on the land APDs, I think.
Is your son a strong bike rider?
No, that was a bit of an issue. We we had worked really hard he's very funny, but he's a little bit of a nervous kid. It took a little bit of time to teach him to ride a bike, and we kind of just gotten there, and he was great about riding it around, the track at the local middle school. But this is the path around Versailles. It's, I think he would have been fine, except at the very beginning of the path, it's very busy. There's a lot of tourists walking around and a lot of bikes. And he got on a regular bike and he kind of just got, I think, overwhelmed by being surrounded by so many people. Mm-hmm. So I said, yeah, it's no big deal. We'll take the training wheel bike.
Oh, so they had that option.
They did have that option, so we thought, okay, that's great. It'll give him a little extra comfort. Meanwhile, my daughter had already zipped off and was, trying to beat Ed around the course. But so I was a little nervous because, I knew I was on my own with them. And I thought, she's well out of my sight, but at least she's with, I trusted the guides and knew she was with the other people of the group. So, okay, she'll be fine. But the training wheel bike, going a couple miles on a training wheel bike is with uphills. And it took us a while. We were we were the last to finish. along with another family with young kids that had one on training wheels who I think they ended up carrying the bike at some point.
Oh, no.
So I can't say I'd recommend it. I mean, Garrett and I were, we were thrilled we made it, and really proud of ourselves for for going around. It was not an easy way to do it. I'll say that.
And was there another way to get where you guys were going if you weren't going to bike?
Oh, yeah. For instance, my mother-in-law just sat it out and sat in the gardens and just enjoyed the view and waited for us to go around we were basically just biking around Versailles. There's a course that you can bike around the lake. And it was beautiful, absolutely stunning. I mean, I'm even with the hardship of having to get off and push my son and then occasionally and run back and get my bike and catch up to him. I was glad I did it because it was beautiful. And my daughter had a blast. I didn't get to watch it. She was well ahead of me, racing ed, but she had, the best time. So, but hopefully next time Garrett will be a little more, good to go on the bike.
This is really good information.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So with Adventures by Disney, the majority of the meals are included and then your accommodations are included. How did it work as far as hotel rooms for you guys? Did you guys have one hotel room or is that something that you have to set up ahead of time since there's 4 of you? Did you get 2 or how does that work?
Yeah, it depends on the place you're staying. In the Landmark, we were all in one room and we had 2, I think they were queen beds, all in one room. I mean, it was a very spacious room actually, which probably part of the reason they chose that hotel. The hotel's in a great location too. And that was, that worked pretty well. There's always the mother-in-law maybe snores occasionally. So there's always that. And then in Paris, I think it's pretty hard to find a hotel room that'll accommodate 4. So we had, they put us in 2 separate rooms. But actually it would end up being great because we got this corner room, I think, that was quite large, I think, I compared to what I heard the other ABD members, saying they were in, and our rooms were connecting too. So it was, we got pretty lucky, I think. And we had 2 bathrooms and lots of space. So, I mean, it was great.
So you start off in London for the first 2 days, and you've kind of touched on some of the different things that you guys did. Without going into specifically every single thing, what were some of the highlights that you guys took away from those 2 days in London that you really enjoyed with the kids, or that you got to do by yourself and the kids did something else?
Yeah, I think we loved the Tower of London. It was fun to walk around. You go before it opens to see the Crown Jewels, so you're basically given a private viewing of the Crown Jewels. You can't take pictures, but that's a lot of fun. The kids loved seeing, the old torture chamber and towers where they imprisoned everybody. And the guard, you were basically in the Tower of London alone before it opened. And the guards and of course the black hats and the red uniforms are walking around, and you get kind of a brief private tour by one of the yeomen. And that was amazing. You don't see the quote unquote, the classic changing of the guard, like when you go to Buckingham Palace. We just kind of walked around the outside, but it was still a lot of fun. And then we went to the gardens at St. James Park. We just walked there from Buckingham Palace, and they give the kids food to feed the ducks, which they enjoyed. And, it was just a beautiful day. It was a little warm when we were there. Actually, when we went to Paris, we arrived on the hottest day of the year. Actually, the hottest day they've ever had in Paris.
It was like 100 or something, wasn't it?
Yep. Yeah. It was well over 100. So that cut that first day a little short because it was so hot, and it created a lot of problems with the train tracks were buckling. Okay. So we actually got lucky that our train made it before, they stopped. They had to kind of stop the trains. It was great. And then we went out to Windsor by coach one day and walked around and saw the palace. And then, like I said, for the kids, I think the highlight was the archery. The kids and the adults really enjoyed that, and it was beautiful. And the high-speed boat ride, on the river was great. We were on there with my son and I were on there with one of the other families, and then Lewis, one of the guides, was in our boat. And they were just, blasting Queen and speeding around the river. And he had, just the best time.
Do you think your daughter would have been sick on it?
I think there was a substantial chance because when it got going really fast, it would go up and down with the waves. That's actually, I kind of had to, when we did our first DCL cruise last year, I kind of dragged her and her dad on kicking and screaming a little bit because they both get motion sick, and the thought of being trapped on a boat for a few days But they ended up absolutely loving it. I mean, they loved the games particularly. They are game fiends, so they just loved all the game shows.
So I think that's one of those things that, just to swing back to going to the Tower of London, that's one of the things that it sounds like ABD does so well for people, is getting you access into places like that before the crowds are there, so you can really enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I kind of noticed is you guys had on the second night, they have like a Junior Adventures dinner and movie night while adults can go and have dinner by themselves. Did your kids enjoy that?
They did, yeah. Like I said, my kids can be, I don't know, I guess a little introverted, a little shy. They don't, for instance, spend a lot of time in the kids' clubs. It's funny because they love doing the game shows and they want to be on stage, actually. My daughter and her dad, when they get chosen, they're both like so excited. Versus I have no interest really necessarily. I'll do it when the kids, are like, Mom, go take a turn at Pictionary or whatever. And my daughter loves doing the karaoke on the ship, but they're just not, they don't typically enjoy going to the clubs and just hanging out there. But they had a fun night at the Junior Adventures night. I think, like I said, Lewis and Seth, the guides are so good that whatever magic they work, the kids have a great time. Since I was there with my mother-in-law, we had dinner with a lady who was traveling by herself with her granddaughter. So,
nice.
So we kind of said, just, join us. And that way she, wasn't eating solo. So, yeah, so it was nice. Like I said, it wasn't me and my significant other, but we had a good time just kind of chatting about the kids.
So from London, you guys head over on the Eurostar to Paris. How was the Eurostar?
It was a little bit of an adventure. There was some kind of problem with it clearly wasn't ABD's fault. It was the Eurostar. The ticketing system seemed pretty disorganized. At first they were telling us about half of us didn't have legitimate tickets, and then there was just a lot of scrambling and confusion. But, the guides were just like, get on, we'll sort it out. We'll figure it out, which, that's kind of when you really appreciate having them around. Because, at first they would say like, I didn't have a legitimate ticket and my kids did. It was very confusing. But we all got on eventually. We made it over there, and then we, got off, and it was like 108 degrees. So our first day in Paris a little short because it was just so hot to walk around. But luckily after that, the weather really cooled down and was really pretty beautiful the rest of our stay.
And for those of you who don't know what the Eurostar is, that's a train that goes between London, it goes from England to France, and it goes underneath the English Channel. So kind of a cool way to get across.
Yeah.
So then you spent 3 days in Paris. You've been to Paris before. Talk about some of the highlights that you guys did there, and what were some of the things that you and the kids enjoyed?
Well, I actually hadn't been to Paris before. I'd been all over Eastern Europe. I'd wanted to go to Paris my whole life because I'd taken French in high school. So for me, it was sort of my dream destination. We went to see the outside of Notre Dame. Obviously, you can't go in it at this point, which when I saw the fire, I thought, I'm finally making it. And, I won't be able to go in. But we did get to kind of pay our respects from the outside. And they substituted one of the opera houses for the tour, which I think that was probably maybe the least interesting thing we did for the kids. But they really enjoyed kind of everything else we did. But we went in the Louvre. They do a kind of a scavenger hunt, an art scavenger hunt with the kids. We went to Versailles, and that was, amazing. Obviously, it was we went very early and walked around before it got too crowded. There were definitely other tour groups there at that time. And we walked around the gardens and had lunch in the gardens and did the bike ride. So I would say those were really the highlights. I think for me, when we had on our own time after the ABD tour completed, I had planned kind of a food crawl, because the kids and I love to snack around Paris. And I had all these stops planned out. And I think the one big thing I learned is don't go to Paris in August, because a lot of French take basically all of August as their holiday. So there were a lot of cafes that were closed, unfortunately.
Just Paris being one of those places that you've always wanted to go, and studying Paris, what were your thoughts of the city?
We loved it. I mean, it's very walkable. I think it's not really as big as you think, actually. So you can walk really around the whole city. There's just so many places to stop and snack. And we went to see the Eiffel Tower with the tour group at night, which was a total blast. And, everybody had a great time. But then, of course, as we were getting ready to leave, it starts pouring.
Oh, no.
And the whole tour group is running, trying to get to the bus, and we're all soaked. And so, everybody gets on the bus, and it's late at night. we're wet and everybody's tired. And so, you would think, okay, this is kind of a nadir in the tour, right? Then the tour guides start, putting on music and singing, and, everybody's singing the whole way back to the hotel. And it's one of the highlights now for the kids. I mean, that's what they talk about. For instance, they put on, from the new Beauty and the Beast live action movie, they put on Days in the Sun and dedicated it to Ed. About the end of his time. And so, it was just so funny, and the kids just really had a blast with it. So you just never know what the highlights are going to be, I think. And then we did some of, I think, the more traditional fun activities for the kids. We went to a chocolate museum, and the kids made chocolate, as did the adults, and it was a blast.
As these tours kind of wind up, one of the big things that you guys get to do is you have that farewell dinner that last night. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that and what your thoughts were and the kids' thoughts were as you were kind of saying goodbye to all these people that you just spent a whole week with?
Sure. It was a little bit crazy because the restaurant was kind of down where the Tour de France happened to be finishing that day.
Oh, jeez.
So the bus had to kind of let us out a little away from it, and we all kind of walked down there. It was great. They did a slideshow, with kind of highlights from the tour, which had some pictures of really everybody, and, everybody kind of oohed and awed, throughout the show. We kind of said our goodbyes, and, it was, a little bittersweet, but it was a lot of fun. And the kids and I, obviously, we knew we had a few more days still to go. I mean, we were going to go to Disneyland Paris, as did several other families from the tour. So we kept running into various people we knew in Disneyland Paris and kind of saying,
That's
hey.
fun.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So you kind of got to extend the tour a little bit in some ways.
So when you guys did that add-on as far as going to Disneyland Paris, is that as a group or was that just individually, like, here's your product, go stay at this hotel and go see it?
Yeah, it was basically individually. They arranged individual cars for, each family.
Oh,
so, for instance, we met our car, I don't know what it is, maybe 9 a.m. the next morning, and we took our car to the Disneyland Hotel, I believe it's called, and, stayed there for a couple nights. And then when that concluded, we had to arrange our own transportation back to Paris because we were going to spend a few extra days ourselves. If you weren't, then ABD would transport you to the airport.
Well, I guess I got just kind of a couple more overall general questions. And I know you've kind of talked about this already, but, kind of thinking back on it, what are some of the highlights that you and your kids still talk about from this trip?
Well, I mean, I think the guides were a big part. I would say food was a big part, of course, in Paris, right? On our own, we did basically a cheese seminar where it was the four of us and then an adult couple. But it was great. I mean, we got to see how they made the cheese and where they stored it. And then we sampled, all these cheeses, and, the kids loved that. And then my daughter and I, for instance, since I'd done the high-speed boat ride with my son, I took her to a place called just Les Soufflés. But it was so much fun. And we were sitting next to this, just classic French lady who was maybe in her 50s and just decked out to the nines. Meanwhile, my daughter and I are in like a T-shirt and jeans. She had on the chair across from her puppy, which just kind of sat there the whole time,
Like out of a movie.
Yeah, it was really out of a movie. And then my daughter ordered the Grand Marnier souffle for dessert because she has that on the DCL cruise line on the night they have it and loves it. But of course, being Paris, they bring the souffle and they bring an entire bottle of the liquor, the Grand Marnier, and start pouring it in the souffle and then leave her the bottle. And I said, okay, well, you could eat a few bites off the top.
Right.
So it was pretty funny. But yeah, I would say just, walking around and enjoying the sights. We went to a lot of museums, and probably by the end they were a little museumed out. We didn't try to, go to the museums necessarily as adults would and see everything. We would find the art that they thought was amusing or scary or just had something that spoke to them, and then talk about it, but also just enjoy walking around. And I think, if you're going to engage kids, you have in the art and the items in the museum, you have to really kind of look at it through their eyes a little bit. So I think that made it fun.
Great idea. Did you get to use your French at all?
A little bit. The kids got a kick out of making fun of me. my accent probably wasn't the best, but I did try a little bit. And then Disneyland Paris was great. Obviously, we had a blast.
So I guess as we kind of finish up here, any advice that you would have for families that want to take their kids over either on an Adventures by Disney trip or just Europe in general that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I would say, I'm not so good at this, but you obviously you can't do everything. And I probably overplanned our days. I did the same in Hawaii. I think it's just, there's always so much you want to do. But I think with kids, they definitely need some downtime. And I think Adventures by Disney is pretty good about that. There was always some some on your own time in the city. And for instance, my son would be tired after, being busy all morning. And so he and grandma might come back and rest in the hotel for a while. And I'd continue walking around the city with my daughter. And then, we'd go back and meet up with them a little later. I think just like when you're taking them to Disney World or Disneyland, they often just need a little bit of a break in the afternoon to kind of regroup and relax, especially when you're walking around all day and you're, when you're in your museums, you're listening to the guides, you're walking, you're constantly taking in a lot of information. So, and I'm not great with that because I'm somebody who wants to, go. It's hard sometimes for me to make myself say, okay, we just have to take a little while and rest. So
I think that's one of the things that we've kind of incorporated actually and I think we kind of learned it from just going to Disneyland, is that a lot of times we'll do stuff in the morning, come back and relax a little bit in the afternoon, and then go out in the evening for dinner and stuff when we've been on some of our trips to Europe and whatnot. So, but I know what you mean. It's hard not to just go and do everything that you want to do. So kind of thinking about this trip then, and I know the answer because we talked about this ahead of time. What's next for you guys, Jen? Are you guys going to do Adventures by Disney again, or DCL, or what's next for you guys?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of everything, I think, sprinkled in. As much as I could go to Disney World all the time or Disneyland, my kids, I think, part of it's my daughter gets motion sick, so she's limited in what she can do. But I think they kind of feel like they want to see other things and do other things. So we're trying to kind of plan a mix of things. We're going to go to Tokyo over Thanksgiving break and spend a few days in the city and do, of course, Tokyo Disney for a couple days. So we're super excited about that. That's definitely.
Did you plan that on your own?
I did. Yeah, that one's on my own, which is, a little nerve wracking. But we did find a guide for the city, since I think, that's definitely, even though from what I read, there's everything, a lot of the signs and things are in English as well, but that's, pretty far out of our comfort zone from what we're used to. So, and then we're going to, over the Christmas break, do the Danube Christmas Market River Cruise, and that's through ABD. And I think that'll be interesting because my kids, in their mind, I think, are seeing the big DCL ship, and well, it's not the same. It's a very different experience.
Right.
But there's not, we're not going to be doing game shows, running around the ice cream machine most of the day. So we'll see. I mean, I think we're excited, and I'm glad they're old enough now that we're doing a lot of different things. But we're excited. Always an adventure.
Well, that's what I love about it. ABD, I guess, or Adventures by Disney, it's a great avenue to get you out and start exploring different parts of the world, and still having that Disney quality and kind of that comfort until you're ready to do it by yourself. I think
it's a little bit of Disney for me, but it's also, I mean, I actually love to plan, and that's part of the reason I think I love Disney World. I love making the big list and checking things off, but when you're busy at work and you're busy with school, it's certainly nice to have a lot of it. Just things are just going to run smoothly. And when hiccups arise, they'll reshuffle things, and a lot of comfort there and ease.
Well said. Well, I guess as we finish up, just have a wonderful time over in Tokyo. Disney,
we will.
Disney Sea. That's the place I would love to go see that.
We're super excited.
And just have a wonderful cruise over there, enjoying the Christmas market. It's just a magical time to be in Europe and seeing a lot of those. And if you're
we'll get to see some snow finally.
Yeah, not as much snow down in Texas.
Feel free to come back to Detroit.
Yeah,
there'll be plenty.
My kids are a little scared of Detroit at this point.
Yeah,
but I'm sure we'll make it back eventually.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Not your fault.
Well, safe travels to you, Jen. Just have a wonderful time. And when you guys get back from your trip over to Europe on the Danube, we'd love to have you come back and talk about your Christmas experience.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, all the best to you and your family. And thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. Well, that's going to wrap up our show this week. Once again, I really want to thank Jennifer for coming on and sharing her and her family's experiences as they traveled over to England and France with Adventures by Disney. She had a lot of really good points, I thought, in this episode when you thinking about, venturing out that first time to Europe with kids and younger kids and when to take them. We took our kids, I guess. Our youngest was 5. Of course, we have traveled a lot with him in the airlines, but we weren't sure what he was going to do. That's some pretty big time zone changes and a lot to ask of the little guys sometimes. But he did really well. We had a great time traveling over to England and then sailing up to Norway on the beautiful Disney Magic. And within the next week, this is February 19, 2020, within the next week, we should be hearing those Europe and Alaska dates coming out for the summer of 2021. So if this is something that you've been thinking about as far as taking your kids and your family over to Europe for the first time, we hope some of these tips that Jennifer was able to share and we talked about will help you as well. If you would like to help support our show, you can do so through our Patreon program. You can go over to patreon.com/DCL podcast and you can find out all the information there. We appreciate each and every one of our Patreon supporters. And we want to thank everyone who's gone over to iTunes and left us a review lately. There's been a lot of them coming in, and we sure do appreciate that. That helps us get the word out about our show and the podcasting community and the cruising community as well. And finally, if you would like to come on our show, you can reach out to me, Steve, at DCLpodcast.com, and we'll get you set up to come on, record, and share your experiences sailing with Disney Cruise Line and traveling with Adventures by Disney, or for those of you who may be running in Princess this weekend down at Walt Disney World, sharing your Run Disney story as well. So once again, thanks for coming back and taking a listen. If you are heading out on your next vacation between now and our next show, all of us here at the DCL Podcast would like to wish you fair winds and safe travels as you head out on that next adventure. Once again, thanks for coming back and taking a listen, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.